On the morning of Thanksgiving 2018, at exactly 9:30 a.m., I carried a plastic tray with 14 diner coffees across the parking lot behind a grocery store in Tucson, Arizona. 10 minutes later, my mother transferred $50,000 out of the college fund that had my name on it. I did not know about the money yet, but I remember the exact moment something inside me went quiet. If you have ever been the child in a family who works twice as hard just to be treated like background noise, stay with me. And if any part of this story feels familiar, hit like and subscribe so more people like us can find these stories. Also, tell me where you are listening from and what time it is in your city. I always read those. My name is Elena Castillo. I am 27 years old now, and I live in Phoenix, Arizona. But this story really starts 8 years ago, in a town where the desert wind carried dust through every parking lot, and everyone seemed to know my older brother before they ever learned my name. The Castillo house sat on a quiet street called Sand Ridge Drive in Tucson, a small tan stucco house with a cracked basketball hoop above the garage. If you opened the refrigerator, you saw 16 photos of my brother Mateo. 16. Baseball trophies, prom photos, graduation cap. There was exactly one photo of me, and it was mostly hidden behind a magnet shaped like a cactus. Mateo Castillo was 3 years older than me. He was the pride of the family. Quarterback, loud laugh, friends everywhere. My mother, Sofia Castillo, called him her miracle boy. I was the quiet one who worked. At 16, I started bussing tables at a diner called Sun Valley Grill off Interstate 10. By 18, I was working the overnight shift, 3 nights a week, while finishing community college classes during the day. My plan was simple: transfer to the University of Arizona, study accounting, graduate debt-free. There was a savings account my grandparents had opened for me when I was 10. My grandmother Rosa told me about it the day before she died. $48,000 set aside for school. Enough to change a life if used carefully. My mother became the custodian of that account when my grandparents passed. At the time, I believed that meant she would protect it. I believed a lot of things back then. The Thanksgiving morning I mentioned earlier started like most holidays in our house. Noise. Mateo yelling from the living room about a football game. My mother rushing around the kitchen complaining about everything. My father Luis sitting at the table drinking coffee without a word. He worked construction most of his life. Good man, quiet man. But quiet can sometimes mean absent, even when the person is sitting right in front of you. At 6 a.m. that morning, I left for my shift at Sun Valley Grill. Holiday shifts paid time and a half. Every dollar mattered to me. Around 9:30, the morning rush slowed down. My manager Rick asked if I could run a catering order to a grocery store parking lot 5 minutes away. 14 coffees and a box of breakfast burritos for a real estate team setting up a Thanksgiving charity booth. I remember balancing the tray in both hands as the desert sun warmed the asphalt. 14 coffees, $32 in tips. The kind of morning where life feels small, but manageable. While I was crossing that parking lot, my phone buzzed in my apron pocket. I could not answer because my hands were full. I did not see the message until 40 minutes later. When I finally checked it, the notification said, "Bank alert, large withdrawal, amount, $50,000. At first, I thought it had to be fraud. The number looked wrong, too big, too impossible. I stepped behind the diner and called the bank. The woman on the phone confirmed the transaction. Authorized withdrawal by account custodian, Sofia Castillo. I remember leaning against the brick wall behind the restaurant and staring at the desert mountains in the distance. My entire college fund had disappeared in one morning. When I got home that evening, the house smelled like turkey and cinnamon. Family everywhere. My Aunt Maribel, my cousins, Mateo laughing in the living room. My mother stood at the stove basting the turkey like nothing in the world had changed. "Mom," I said quietly, "did you take money out of the college account today?" She did not even turn around. "Yes." Just one word. Yes. My stomach tightened. "Why?" She finally looked at me. Her expression was calm, almost annoyed. "Your brother needed help with a business opportunity." Mateo was 23 at the time, and unemployed. What business opportunity? My mother waved the question away like smoke. Investment with friends, real estate, something promising. I felt the room spin a little. That money was for school. She sighed the way people sigh when a child asks too many questions. Elena, family helps family. Mateo walked in right then, carrying a plate of pie. He grinned when he saw me. Relax, little sister. I will pay it back when the deal closes. That deal never closed, but I did not know that yet. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed and opened my laptop. Tuition at the University of Arizona for accounting, $21,000 per year. 4 years meant $84,000. My savings account balance now read 0. I stared at the number for a long time. Something inside my chest hardened in a way I could not explain back then. Not anger, not yet. More like a door quietly locking. The next morning, I picked up an extra shift at the diner, then another. Within 6 months, I was working 70 hours a week. I postponed the university transfer and enrolled in night classes instead. It took me 6 years to finish my degree that way. 6 years of coffee stains, exhaustion, and tuition payments that came out of tips and overtime. During those 6 years, my mother never mentioned the $50,000 again. Neither did Mateo. But something else happened during that time. Something small at first, then impossible to ignore. Because every few months my mother would call me with the same sentence. Elena, we need help again. And somehow the numbers kept getting bigger. 500, 2,000, 10,000 once. I kept telling myself it was temporary. I kept believing the same promise. Family helps family. Until one night, 3 months ago, when a man from the bank asked me a question that changed everything. He said, "Miss Castillo, are you aware your name appears on a loan connected to your brother?" I had never signed any loan. I had never even seen the paperwork. And the amount on that loan was $180,000. What I discovered after that call led to the night I walked into a family dinner with a folder full of documents. And the moment my mother realized the quiet daughter she ignored for years had finally stopped playing along. But before I explain what was inside that folder, there is something you need to understand about my brother Mateo. Because the money he took from my future was only the beginning. On the 4th of July weekend in 2014, when I was 19 years old, my brother Mateo Castillo spent $12,000 in less than 6 hours at a casino outside Tucson. I was standing behind a diner counter that same night, refilling iced tea for a table of truck drivers. At the time, I believed the two events had nothing to do with each other. Now I know they were connected in ways I could not see yet. If you have ever watched someone in your family burn through opportunity, while you quietly rebuild what they destroyed, you will understand what comes next. And if you are still here with me, hit like and subscribe. It helps more people find stories like this. Back then, Mateo had just turned 24. He lived in a 1-bedroom apartment 10 minutes from our parents' house. No steady job, no schedule. But somehow, he always had money. At least, that was what it looked like on the surface. New shoes every month. Weekend trips to Las Vegas. Photos on Instagram with stacks of poker chips and captions about winning big. My mother loved those photos. She shared them constantly. My successful son, my risk taker, my future entrepreneur. Meanwhile, I was working the graveyard shift 3 nights a week and attending accounting classes during the day. My car was a 2007 Toyota Corolla with 182,000 miles on it. The air conditioning worked only half the time. But it was mine, and every mile felt earned. The first time I noticed something strange about Mateo's money was during Christmas dinner in 2015. There were 11 people around the table. My mother had cooked a huge meal: turkey, ham, mashed potatoes, tamales from my Aunt Maribel. Mateo showed up 2 hours late, wearing a leather jacket that looked like it cost more than my monthly rent. My mother lit up when she saw him. "Mi hijo," she said proudly. He kissed her on the cheek and dropped a set of car keys onto the table. Brand new BMW, used, but still at least $30,000. Everyone at the table stared. My father raised an eyebrow. Nice car, he said carefully. Mateo grinned. Investment money paying off. I remember looking at my mother then. Her expression wasn't surprise. It was satisfaction, as if the success confirmed something she had always believed. Later that night, I helped wash dishes while my mother wrapped leftovers. "Mom," I asked quietly, "where did Mateo get money for that car?" She barely glanced at me. "Why are you always suspicious of your brother?" "I'm not suspicious, I'm curious." She stacked another plate and shrugged. "He is ambitious. Some people take risks in life. Some people play it safe." Her eyes flicked toward me when she said the last sentence. That was when I realized something important. In my mother's world, there were two types of children, the shining one and the practical one. Mateo was the dream. I was the backup plan. 2 years later, when I was 21, Mateo asked me for money for the first time. It was a Tuesday night. I had just finished a 10-hour shift at the diner. My phone rang at 11:17 p.m. Mateo rarely called me directly. "Hey, little sis," he said. His voice was cheerful, almost too cheerful. "What's up?" He paused. "I need a small favor." I closed my eyes. "How much?" 3,000? I laughed softly. "Mateo, I don't have $3,000. He lowered his voice. "Mom said you've been saving. For school. It's temporary. Just until next month." I should have said no. Instead, I transferred the money the next day. 2 weeks later, he posted photos from Las Vegas. Stacks of poker chips again. Champagne. Bright lights. I stared at those photos for a long time. But when I asked him about the loan later, he said the same thing my mother always said. "Relax, I'll pay you back." He never did. That was the first time, but not the last. Over the next 3 years, the pattern repeated. Small emergencies, short-term investments, temporary loans. Each request came wrapped in the same family logic. Family helps family. My mother always reinforced the idea. She called me responsible, reliable, the one who keeps this family stable. It sounded like praise, but it functioned like pressure. One night when I was 24, I asked my father about it. We were sitting in the backyard. The desert air was warm, cicadas buzzing in the distance. "Dad, do you think Mateo will ever pay back what he borrows?" My father rubbed his hands together slowly. "Your brother has always believed things will work out. That's not what I asked." He sighed. "Elena, sometimes the strongest person in a family carries more weight." That answer told me everything. He knew. He just wasn't going to stop it. Around that same time, Mateo started talking about real estate, flipping houses, short-term rentals, big opportunities. My mother repeated his plans like they were gospel. "Mateo is going to make us all proud." One night during dinner, she said something that stuck with me. "When Mateo succeeds, we all succeed." The message was clear. If I helped him succeed, the family benefited. If I questioned him, I was the problem. So I kept working. I kept paying my own tuition. And every month I slowly rebuilt the savings account that had once held $50,000. It took me almost 6 years to reach $30,000 again. 30,000 earned one diner shift at a time. Then 3 months ago, something strange happened. I received a letter from a bank in Phoenix. At first I assumed it was junk mail, but when I opened it, my stomach dropped. Loan statement. Borrower, Mateo Castillo. Co-borrower, Elena Castillo. Balance, $180,000. I read the letter 3 times. My hands started shaking. I had never signed a loan for my brother, not once. I called the bank immediately. The man who answered introduced himself as David Harmon from the loan servicing department. "Miss Castillo," he said, "you are listed as a guarantor on a property loan issued 18 months ago." I felt the air leave my lungs. "That's impossible. I never signed anything." There was a pause on the line. Then he said something that made my skin go cold. "The application includes your signature and your social security number." At that moment, one question exploded in my mind. How did Mateo get my signature? And more importantly, who helped him do it? But the answer to that question would take me straight back into my parents' house and into a conversation with my mother that would reveal something even worse than the missing $50,000. On a Tuesday evening in March, at exactly 6:42 p.m., I drove 112 miles from Phoenix back to my parents' house in Tucson, with a printed loan statement sitting on the passenger seat. The number on that paper was $180,000. And according to the bank, my name guaranteed every cent of it. I had not signed the loan, but someone in my family had made sure the bank believed I did. If you have ever discovered your own name attached to something you never agreed to, you know the kind of silence that fills your car during a drive like that. Stay with me. And if this story resonates, hit like and subscribe so more people who need to hear it can find it. The sun was setting when I turned onto Sand Ridge Drive. The same tan stucco house, the same cracked basketball hoop above the garage. Nothing looked different, but the feeling in my chest had changed. I parked in the driveway and sat in the car for almost 2 minutes, staring at the front door. $180,000. That number kept repeating in my mind. A loan that size meant property, probably a house, which meant Mateo had bought real estate, using my name. The front door opened before I even reached the porch. My mother Sophia stood there holding a dish towel. "Elena, you didn't say you were coming." Her voice sounded surprised, but not worried. That was the first strange thing. "Mom," I said, "we need to talk." She stepped aside. The living room smelled like laundry detergent and tortillas. The television was on. My father Luis sat in his usual chair, watching a baseball game with the volume low. Mateo wasn't there. That was the second strange thing. Usually when I visited unexpectedly, he appeared within minutes. "Mom," I said, holding up the envelope, "what is this?" She glanced at it quickly. Her face did not change. "Where did you get that?" "The bank sent it." I laid the paper on the kitchen table. Loan amount, $180,000. Borrower, Mateo Castillo. Co-borrower, Elena Castillo. My mother read it silently. Then she folded the paper and placed it back in the envelope. Her calm reaction told me something before she even spoke. She already knew. "Mom," I said slowly, "I never signed this loan." She leaned against the counter and crossed her arms. "Mateo said you agreed to help him." "No, I did not." She sighed. "Elena, your brother is trying to build something. He needed support." That word again, support. My voice sharpened. Support does not mean forging my name on a loan. My father shifted in the living room, but did not look over. My mother lowered her voice. "No one forged anything." "Then how is my signature on the paperwork?" She hesitated. Just half a second. Long enough. "Mateo handled the documents." "Of course he did." "When did this loan happen?" "About 1.5 years ago." 18 months. The same timeline the bank had mentioned. My chest tightened. "Mom, did you give him my social security number?" Her silence answered the question. The kitchen clock ticked loudly on the wall. "You had it written on that tax form," she finally said. "It was in the file cabinet." I stared at her. "You took my information." "For family." The way she said it made it sound almost reasonable. That was when something inside me snapped into clarity. My mother did not believe she had done anything wrong. From her perspective, she had simply moved resources within the family. I lowered my voice. "Mom, that is fraud." She waved her hand dismissively. "Don't use dramatic words." Dramatic. $180,000 attached to my credit. My father finally turned in his chair. "What's going on?" I held up the paper. "Dad, Mateo took out a property loan using my name." Luis frowned. "Mateo wouldn't do that." "Mom helped him," I said quietly. The room went still. My father looked at my mother. She held his gaze calmly. "It was an investment property," she said. "A rental house. Mateo needed stronger credit to qualify." Elena's credit score was excellent. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. You risked my financial future without asking me. She stepped closer. Your family. The same words, over and over. Family helps family. My voice dropped. What happens if Mateo stops paying? He won't. What if he does? She didn't answer. I pulled my phone out and opened the email from the bank. The loan payment is already 2 months late. That got her attention. What? The statement arrived today. 2 missed payments. My father stood up slowly. Mateo said the property was doing well. Apparently not. My mother grabbed the envelope again and scanned the paper. Her confident posture started to shift. How much are the payments? I pointed to the line on the document. $2,400 per month. The number hung in the air. Dad spoke first. Where is Mateo? My mother looked toward the hallway. He's out with friends. Of course he was. I picked up my bag. I'm calling the bank tomorrow. Her head snapped up. You can't do that. Why not? Because you'll ruin everything. Everything? Meaning Mateo's investment. Meaning the family image she protected so carefully. I met her eyes. Mom, he already ruined something. My credit, my future. She stepped closer and lowered her voice. If you report this, Mateo could face legal trouble. Legal trouble. The phrase echoed in the kitchen. For a moment, I imagined the chain reaction. Fraud investigation, police, courtrooms, family divided. Then my mother said something that changed the direction of the entire situation. Elena, she said quietly, if you go to the bank, they'll start looking at other accounts too. Other accounts. My stomach tightened. What other accounts? She realized too late that she had said too much. Nothing, she said quickly. Just paperwork. But the damage was done. Because that one sentence raised a new question, a bigger one. What other financial documents had my name on them? And more importantly, how many things had my mother and brother signed for me without ever telling me? 3 days after that conversation in my parents' kitchen, at 8:15 on a Thursday morning, I sat inside a bank office in downtown Phoenix while a loan officer slowly scrolled through 6 different financial accounts attached to my name. I had walked in expecting to discuss one suspicious loan. Instead, I was about to discover 3 more. If you have ever felt the moment when the ground under your understanding of your own life suddenly shifts, you know the feeling I had sitting in that chair. My hands were folded on the desk in front of me. Across from me sat David Harmon, the same loan officer I had spoken to on the phone earlier that week. He was in his early 50s, glasses, calm voice. The kind of man who had probably delivered bad financial news to hundreds of people before me. Miss Castillo, he said carefully, before we talk about the property loan, I need to verify a few things. Okay. He turned his monitor slightly so I could see the screen. Your credit file shows several active accounts. Yes, that part didn't surprise me. Student loans, my credit card, my car, normal things. But then he scrolled, and I saw the first unfamiliar entry. Business credit line, borrower, Mateo Castillo, authorized guarantor, Elena Castillo, balance, $62,000. I leaned forward. I have never seen that account before. Mr. Harmon nodded slowly. The documents show your signature as a guarantor. My stomach dropped. That's not my signature. He clicked another file. This account was opened 11 months ago. Then he scrolled again. Second unfamiliar entry. Personal loan, $40,000. Again with my name attached. Then a third. Credit card line with a limit of $25,000. My chest felt tight. How many accounts are there? He looked at the screen again. Including the property loan, 4 accounts connected to your name where Mateo Castillo is the primary borrower. The numbers started stacking in my head. 180,000, 62,000, 40,000, 25,000, $307,000, all connected to my credit history, without my permission. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Mr. Harmon watched me quietly. Miss Castillo, he said gently, based on the documentation, Your identity appears to have been used to secure multiple loans. Identity. That word felt strange, because the people who had used it were my own family. I took a slow breath. What happens if those accounts default? He answered without hesitation. As a guarantor, you are legally responsible for repayment. $300,000. My mind started doing the same calculations it always did. At my current salary as a junior accountant in Phoenix, it would take at least 10 years to pay off debt that large. 10 years. For loans I had never agreed to. Mr. Harmon spoke again. You have the option to dispute these accounts as fraudulent. The word hung in the air. Fraud. Which meant investigation, police reports, court records. My mother's warning echoed in my mind. If you go to the bank, they'll start looking at other accounts too. Now I knew what she meant. They had used my identity more than once. I rubbed my temples. When were these accounts opened? The business credit line 18 months ago. The property loan shortly after. The personal loan 11 months ago. The credit card 8 months ago. A steady pattern. Each new account appearing after the last one reached its limit. Like someone building a tower of debt and stacking it on top of my name. Mr. Harmon slid a folder across the desk. These are copies of the loan applications. I opened the folder. The first page contained a digital copy of my supposed signature. It looked almost convincing, but not quite. The angle of the letters was wrong, the spacing slightly off. Someone had practiced it. My throat felt dry. Who submitted these applications? Most were processed through an online broker, he said, but the property loan involved a local mortgage agent. He turned the page and pointed. Name, Daniel Ross, Phoenix Real Estate Financing Group. Address, downtown. I wrote the name down. The business credit line listed a different contact. Investment consultant, named Brian Keller. Another name, another lead. I closed the folder slowly. What happens if I dispute everything? Mr. Harmon folded his hands. Then the accounts would be frozen while the bank investigates. And Mateo, he could face criminal charges. There it was again. The same reality my mother had tried to avoid. Family or justice. But the situation became even more complicated when Mr. Harmon said the next sentence. There's one more detail you should know. I looked up. Your mailing address on several of these applications is not your Phoenix apartment. It's your parents' house in Tucson. Of course it was. Which meant every piece of bank correspondence had been sent there. Every warning, every statement, every late notice, intercepted. My mother had known about the debts the entire time. The realization felt like ice in my chest. She wasn't just covering for Mateo. She was managing the situation, controlling the flow of information, exactly the way she always controlled conversations in our family. Mr. Harmon leaned back in his chair. Miss Castillo, I want to ask something carefully. Okay. Did you ever provide Mateo access to your personal documents? I thought about the file cabinet in my parents' house, the tax forms, my social security number, my signature on old paperwork. Yes, I said quietly. Years ago. He nodded. That would have made it easier. Easier. Such a simple word for something that could destroy my financial future. I gathered the papers slowly. Thank you for showing me this. He stood as well. If you decide to dispute the accounts, contact me directly. I walked out of the bank into the bright Arizona sunlight. Phoenix traffic roared past, normal life moving around me. But inside my head, something had shifted. For years, I believed my family saw me as dependable, responsible, the one who kept everything stable. Now, I realized something darker. They had been using that reliability as collateral. My name, my credit, my future, all treated like tools. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the numbers in the folder. $307,000. Then I did what I always do when things feel chaotic. I started organizing. I made a spreadsheet that night. Every loan, every account, every timeline. Dates, amounts, signatures, patterns. And the deeper I dug into the documents, the clearer one detail became. Matteo had not created this financial structure alone. Someone else had helped arrange the loans. Someone with experience. Someone who knew exactly how to move money between accounts. And that person's name appeared again and again in the paperwork. Brian Keller, investment consultant. Which raised a question I could not ignore. Why would a professional financial consultant help my unemployed brother borrow more than $300,000? Unless there was something in it for him. But the most unsettling discovery came later that night, when I opened the property loan file again, because buried in the final pages of the mortgage paperwork was a document that changed everything. A notarized authorization form, signed by my mother, Sofia Castillo, granting Matteo permission to use my identity for financial transactions. And that meant the situation was no longer just about my brother. It meant my mother had officially helped him do it. At 2:10 a.m. on a Sunday morning, 3 weeks after the bank meeting, I sat at my kitchen table in Phoenix with 12 printed documents spread in front of me and a calculator blinking on the screen of my laptop. The number at the bottom of my spreadsheet read $312,480. That was the total amount of debt connected to my name, some of it already overdue. Some of it still quietly growing interest, and every line of that spreadsheet traced back to two people. My brother, Matteo Castillo, and my mother, Sofia Castillo. If you have ever had the moment where the story you believed about your family begins to collapse under actual numbers, then you understand the kind of quiet I felt that night. Numbers do not lie. People do. I started with the property loan. $180,000, issued 18 months earlier to purchase a small 3-bedroom rental house in Mesa, Arizona. According to the loan file, the house was supposed to be generating income, a long-term tenant paying $2,000 per month. But the payment history told a different story. Late. Late again. 2 months missed. Then partial payment. Then another missed payment. The mortgage company had already sent 2 formal warning letters, both addressed to the Tucson house, which meant my mother had probably seen them weeks before I did. The second account was the business credit line, $62,000 borrowed through something called Castillo Property Investments, LLC. The company name sounded official, but when I searched Arizona business records, the registration date appeared, 14 months earlier. Owner listed, Matteo Castillo. Business activity listed, residential property investments. But there was something strange about the filing. Under managing member, there was a second name, Sofia Castillo, my mother. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. She wasn't just helping him. She was legally connected to the company. The third account was the personal loan, $40,000. Issued through a lending broker named Brian Keller, the same name I had seen at the bank. And the last account was the credit card, $25,000 limit, balance $23,900, nearly maxed out. I opened the transaction history. The charges looked like a travel blog. Las Vegas casino hotels, airline tickets, electronics stores, expensive restaurants. None of it related to real estate. My brother had been living on borrowed money, and that borrowed money was backed by my credit. I rubbed my eyes. The clock on my stove read 2:43 a.m. Marcus was the first person I called the next morning. Marcus Wynn was my coworker at the accounting firm where I worked. He was 32, calm, precise, the kind of man who treated financial documents the way surgeons treat medical scans, carefully, without panic. We met at a small coffee shop downtown. I slid the folder across the table. He read everything without speaking. 5 full minutes. Then he looked up. "This is organized, thank you. But that's not the problem. The problem is that someone structured this intentionally." Structured, meaning planned. He pointed at the spreadsheet. "Look at the timeline. Property loan first, then business credit, then personal loan, then credit card. Each account appears after the previous one starts hitting limits. Like someone building a ladder. Exactly. I stared at the paper. Mateo doesn't think like this. Marcus nodded. No, but someone else involved might. He tapped the name Brian Keller. This consultant arranged the personal loan, but the paperwork shows he also recommended the mortgage broker, which means he's connected to at least 2 of the loans. You think he's part of it. I think he profits from it. That sentence sat heavy in the air. Marcus continued. Loan brokers earn commissions. The bigger the loan, the bigger the commission. If someone presented him with a borrower whose credit score was above 750, he could secure large approvals quickly. My credit score had always been above 780 because I paid everything on time, because I lived carefully, which meant I was the perfect guarantor, even if I never knew about it. Marcus leaned forward. But there's something else. What? He turned the property file toward me. Look at the notarized authorization page again. I had seen it already. My mother's signature granting Mateo permission to use my identity for financial matters. But Marcus pointed to something I had missed. The notary stamp, dated 19 months ago. Location, Tucson. Which meant the document had been notarized at least a month before the property loan application. Before the entire chain started. My mother had signed permission for Mateo to use my identity before the debts even existed, before the loans, before the property, which meant she knew what was coming. My chest tightened. This wasn't an emergency decision. It was preparation. Marcus sat back. Your mother didn't just cover for Mateo. She helped create the system. The sentence landed like a stone in my stomach. For years, I had believed she was reacting to problems my brother created, but the paperwork suggested something different. She helped build the structure that allowed those problems to grow, and that raised a much darker possibility. Maybe Mateo wasn't the one running the operation. Maybe my mother was. Marcus spoke again. You have 2 options. I already knew what he was going to say. Option 1. Ignore it. Hope Mateo somehow fixes the debts before lenders start collections. Option 2. Report identity fraud and force a legal investigation. If you choose option 2, the bank will freeze the accounts and investigators will start asking questions. Questions for Mateo. Questions for your mother. I stared at my coffee. If I report it, my family will never forgive me. Marcus shrugged slightly. If you don't report it, you'll spend the next decade paying off debt that isn't yours. 10 years, maybe more. The silence between us stretched for several seconds. Then Marcus asked a question that changed how I saw the entire situation. Elena, have you looked at the rental property itself? No. Why? Because if Mateo actually bought a property 18 months ago, there should be rental income. $2,000 a month according to the loan file. $24,000 a year. So where is that money? The question hit me immediately. I had been focused on the debts, but not the supposed income. Marcus pulled out his phone. Let's check something. He searched the address from the mortgage paperwork. The result appeared instantly. A listing on a short-term rental site. Photos of a furnished house, swimming pool, backyard grill. Price per night, $380. Availability calendar. Nearly fully booked. Marcus turned the phone toward me. This isn't a long-term rental. It's a vacation rental, which means the property might be making far more money than the mortgage payment. My mind started running numbers automatically. $380 per night. Even if it was booked only half the month, that was at least $5,000, maybe more. Marcus nodded slowly. If that house is running as a vacation rental, someone is collecting the revenue, and it's not going toward the loan payments. Which meant one thing. The money wasn't disappearing. It was going somewhere. And the next question became unavoidable. Who exactly was controlling the income from that property? Because the answer might prove something even bigger than fraud. It might prove someone in my family had been running a profitable business using my name and keeping every dollar. On a hot Saturday afternoon in early June, at exactly 3:18 p.m., I stood across the street from a beige rental house in Mesa, Arizona. watching two tourists wheel bright red suitcases through the front door. They had just paid $385 for one night. The house behind them carried a mortgage under my name. And according to the bank, the payment on that mortgage had been late for 2 months. If you are still with me, think about that for a moment. A house making money every week. A loan supposedly struggling. Someone was collecting the income, and someone was lying about where it went. Marcus stood beside me in the shade of a small Palo Verde tree. We had driven 40 minutes from Phoenix that afternoon to see the property ourselves. Neither of us spoke for almost a minute. The house looked exactly like the photos online. 3 bedrooms, fresh white paint, artificial turf in the yard, a small pool in the back. On the mailbox, the address numbers matched the mortgage paperwork. Marcus finally said what I was already thinking. This place is not failing. No, not even close. We watched as the couple finished unloading their luggage. A cleaning service van pulled into the driveway. A woman stepped out with a vacuum and a plastic bin of supplies. Turnover cleaning, meaning new guests had just checked out earlier that morning. I checked the rental calendar again on my phone. Booked nearly every weekend. Half the weekdays, too. Marcus started calculating out loud. Let's be conservative. Average $280 per night after fees. 15 nights a month minimum. That's $4,200. Mortgage payment was $2,400, right? Yes, which means the property should be profitable. At least $1,800 a month, probably more. Yet the mortgage was late. I felt a familiar pressure building in my chest. Someone was siphoning the income. Marcus looked at the house again. Question is who? I already suspected the answer, but we needed proof. That evening, we sat in my apartment with laptops open. Marcus pulled up public property records. The house had been purchased for $170,000. Mortgage amount, $180,000, which meant additional cash had been borrowed during the purchase. Furniture maybe, repairs, startup costs. But then Marcus opened something else. Short-term rental hosting records. And there it was. The account managing the property. Host name, SC Desert Stays. I frowned. What does SC mean? Marcus searched again. An LLC registration appeared. SC Desert Stays, LLC. Owner, Sofia Castillo. My mother. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Marcus said quietly, "Your mother is running the rental business." The air in the room felt suddenly heavy. The property loan carried my name, but the rental income account belonged to my mother, which meant every booking, every payment, every deposit was going directly to her. Marcus turned the laptop toward me. Estimated annual revenue, $92,000. I stared at the number. 92,000. Even after cleaning fees and maintenance, the profit would easily cover the mortgage, and then some. But the mortgage still had missed payments, which meant the money wasn't being used to pay the loan. It was being used somewhere else. I leaned back in my chair. So she used my credit to buy the property, then opened a rental company in her name. Marcus nodded slowly. Looks that way. And Mateo, he's probably the public face, the one everyone thinks is running the business. But the legal control appears to be your mother. The pieces were finally starting to fit together. The company registration, the notarized authorization form, the intercepted bank letters. My mother had quietly built a business, using my identity as financial backing. And the deeper we dug, the more obvious the pattern became. Marcus opened the booking history again. Look at the revenue flow. Payments from guests go to the hosting platform, then transferred to the account listed under the company, which means the money goes straight to your mother's business account, and not toward the mortgage. Exactly. So where does it go? Marcus clicked another tab. Public business filings showed a linked commercial account, and suddenly another number appeared on the screen. Business account balance estimate, $138,000. Accumulated over 18 months. My stomach tightened. That money should have paid down the mortgage, Instead, it was sitting in a company account under my mother's control, which raised an even bigger question. If the property was making money, why let the loan payments fall behind? Marcus looked thoughtful. Two possibilities. Either she's using the money elsewhere, or she's preparing to refinance the property, using the income history and the loan in my name, meaning she could potentially pull even more money out of the property later. My chest felt tight again. So she could expand the business. Exactly. More properties, more loans, more accounts tied to your credit. That possibility landed like a punch to the stomach. If I had not discovered the first loan statement 3 months earlier, the system could have continued quietly. More properties, more debt, all under my name. Marcus closed the laptop slowly. This isn't just financial irresponsibility. This is a business model. My phone buzzed on the table. A message from my mother. It read, "Family dinner next Saturday. Everyone will be there. Come home. We should talk about the future." Future. The word made my chest tighten, because for the first time in years, my mother was inviting the entire family to dinner, which meant something else was coming. Marcus read the message over my shoulder. That sounds planned. Exactly. My mother never gathered the entire family without a purpose, which meant she probably intended to announce something. Maybe the rental business. Maybe another investment. Maybe even ask for more support. But this time things were different, because now I knew where the money had gone. I knew how the system worked, and I had the documents to prove it. Marcus leaned back in his chair. If you go to that dinner, you need to be ready. Ready for what? For the moment when she asks you to help again, because I guarantee that's coming. I looked at the spreadsheet on my laptop. $300,000 of debt, a profitable rental property, a business account holding more than $100,000, and my name tied to every loan. For years, I had been the quiet daughter, the responsible one, the one who absorbed every financial shock without making a scene. But now, something inside me had changed, because next Saturday, my mother was planning a family gathering. What she didn't know was that I was planning something too, and it involved a folder full of documents. The kind of documents that could make an entire room go silent. 2 nights before the family dinner, at exactly 11:06 p.m., I canceled the automatic payment that had been quietly covering my brother's overdue mortgage for the last 2 months. The amount was $2,400. I had paid it twice already, without telling anyone. That was the last time. If you've ever reached the moment where silence stops being patience and starts becoming permission, you'll understand why I did it. For years, I had been fixing problems behind the scenes, paying small debts, transferring money when my mother said the family needed help, cleaning up situations I didn't create. But $300,000 of hidden loans changes the definition of help. It becomes exploitation, and something inside me had finally stopped cooperating. If you're still here listening, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been the responsible one in a family where responsibility slowly turns into a leash? I'm curious how many people recognize that pattern, because that realization hit me hard that night. Marcus sat across from me on my couch while I closed the banking app. He didn't say anything for a moment. "You're sure about this?" "Yes. Once the payment stops, the lender will start calling Mateo directly." "Exactly. And they'll probably send another warning letter. To your parents' house, which means your mother will know immediately." I nodded. "Good." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "You're not trying to solve this quietly anymore." "No, the quiet phase is over." The sentence sounded colder than I expected, but it felt true. For the first time since discovering the loans, I wasn't scrambling to fix something. I was letting the system reveal itself. Marcus tapped the folder sitting on my coffee table. "How much are you bringing with you Saturday?" "Everything." Inside that folder were printed copies of every document we had gathered: the property mortgage, the rental income records, the business registration showing my mother as owner, the loan applications carrying my forged signature. 14 pages total, organized chronologically. Numbers never need to shout. They just sit there, waiting for someone to read them. Marcus picked up the folder and flipped through the pages again. You realize this dinner might explode. Probably. And once the truth comes out, there's no putting it back. I looked out the window toward the Phoenix skyline. For most of my life, I had avoided confrontation with my family. Not because I was weak, because I believed conflict would only create more damage. But now I understood something different. Avoiding conflict had allowed the damage to grow quietly. Sometimes, silence protects the wrong people. Marcus spoke again. What do you think your mom is planning to announce Saturday? I already had a guess. The rental business. Why? Because she's finally making money? And once people see success, they stop asking questions about how it started. Marcus nodded slowly. That makes sense. The perfect moment to celebrate, and to ask for more support. Exactly, because my mother loved one phrase more than any other. Family helps family. I had heard that sentence for almost 10 years, but now I understood the real translation. Family helps Mateo. I leaned forward and opened the folder. The first page was the mortgage statement. Second page, the business registration. Third page, the rental income summary. Marcus pointed at something near the bottom. Did you notice this earlier? What? He tapped the booking summary. The vacation rental platform had recorded 241 bookings over the last 18 months. Average nightly rate, $340. Estimated gross revenue, $178,000. I blinked. That's higher than the estimate we saw before. Much higher. Marcus nodded, which means the property generated enough money to pay off half the mortgage already. But the mortgage balance hasn't dropped at all, meaning every dollar of income went somewhere else. My stomach tightened. Where? Marcus closed the laptop. That's the question your mother won't want to answer in front of 20 relatives. The thought made something strange happen inside me. Not fear, something closer to calm. Because the truth was no longer complicated. The numbers spoke for themselves. $300,000 of debt attached to my credit. $178,000 of rental revenue. A business owned by my mother. A brother who kept borrowing money. The story was simple now. Marcus stood up and walked to the kitchen. When he returned, he handed me a glass of water. There's something else you should think about. What? Your father. My chest tightened slightly. What about him? Do you think he knows? I thought about that for a long moment. My father, Luis, had spent most of his life avoiding conflict, working long hours, keeping peace inside the house. But peace often meant letting my mother make the decisions. I don't know what he knows, I said quietly, but I know he never asked questions. Marcus nodded, which means Saturday might be the first time he hears the full picture too. That thought made my stomach twist, because this confrontation wasn't only about my mother, it was about the entire structure of our family. Who spoke? Who stayed quiet? Who carried the weight? Marcus picked up his keys. One more thing before I go. Yeah, when your mom asks you for help Saturday, what are you going to say? I didn't hesitate. No. He smiled slightly. Good answer. But remember something. What? He pointed at the folder. You're not just saying no. You're showing why. After he left, I sat alone on the couch for a while. The apartment was quiet, the desert night outside warm and still. I thought about the house in Mesa, the tourists checking in, the money flowing into my mother's business account. I thought about the loan letters sent to my parents' house, the signatures I never wrote. And I thought about my brother Mateo, because for all the damage he had caused, there was still one detail I hadn't explained yet. Mateo wasn't always like this. When we were kids, he used to protect me, walk me home from school, fix my bike, share his candy. Somewhere along the way, that version of him disappeared, and the man who replaced him was someone who treated my future like a credit line, which made me wonder something I hadn't asked yet. How long had my mother been encouraging that behavior? Because the system we uncovered didn't start 18 months ago. It started much earlier. years earlier. And the moment that pattern began was something I had ignored at the time, but now it looked completely different. It happened the night my mother said a sentence I will never forget. She looked at Matteo and told him, "You deserve big opportunities." And then she looked at me and said something else. "Elena will always figure things out." At the time, it sounded like confidence. Now, I realize it was permission. 3 days before the family dinner, on Wednesday afternoon at exactly 4:27 p.m., I walked into the Maricopa County Recorder's office with a folder under my arm and one very specific question. I wanted to know how many properties had been purchased using my name. At that moment, I believed there was only one, the rental house in Mesa. But something Marcus said the night before kept repeating in my head. Systems rarely stop at one success. If someone builds a profitable model, they expand it, which meant if my mother had successfully used my credit once, she might have tried again. And that possibility was enough to keep me awake most of the night. If you've ever had that feeling where a single unanswered question starts growing until it fills the entire room in your mind, you know what that morning felt like. Because the worst discoveries in life rarely arrive all at once. They arrive in layers. The county office sat in a beige government building in downtown Phoenix. Fluorescent lights, gray carpet, rows of public computer terminals. A clerk named Diane helped me log into the public records database. "Property search by name," she explained. "You can check ownership records, mortgages, liens." I typed my name slowly. Elena Maria Castillo. The search results appeared. The first listing was the one I expected, the Mesa rental house. Mortgage lender, Desert Horizon Lending. Loan amount, $180,000. But underneath it, another record appeared. My stomach tightened. Second property, address in Glendale, Arizona. Loan amount, $95,000. Date issued, 9 months ago. I stared at the screen. I had never heard of a property in Glendale, but there it was. Borrower, Matteo Castillo. Guarantor, Elena Castillo. Another mortgage. My chest felt tight. I clicked the document. Property type, small duplex, 2 units. Estimated rent for each unit, according to local listings, about $1,400 per month, which meant the building could produce roughly $2,800 monthly. I opened the mortgage details. Monthly payment, $1,800, which meant that property was also profitable. Another ladder rung. Another loan, supported by my credit. My hands were starting to shake. I turned to the clerk. "Is there a way to check if my name appears on additional property filings?" Diane nodded. "We can expand the search statewide." She typed quickly. The system processed for a moment. Then the results refreshed. 3 properties, not 2. My heart skipped. The third record appeared below the others. A small townhouse in Chandler, purchased 4 months earlier. Loan amount, $75,000. Borrower, Matteo Castillo. Guarantor, Elena Castillo. 3 properties, 3 mortgages. Total property debt, $350,000. And all of it tied to my credit history. For several seconds, I just stared at the screen. The room around me seemed quiet and distant. The pattern was obvious now. First property, Mesa Vacation Rental. Second property, Glendale Duplex. Third property, Chandler Townhouse. Each purchase spaced months apart, each one approved because my credit score guaranteed the loan. My mother hadn't built one business. She had started building a small real estate portfolio, using my identity as financial leverage. I printed the records. 21 pages of documentation, mortgage approvals, property deeds, loan terms. As the printer finished, Diane looked at me carefully. "Everything okay?" I forced a small smile. "Just doing some research." But inside my head, something had shifted again. Because now, the numbers were much bigger. 3 properties, mortgage totals approaching $350,000, plus the credit line, plus the personal loan, plus the credit card. Total financial exposure now over $400,000. My legs felt slightly unsteady when I walked back outside. The Arizona sun hit my face as I stepped onto the sidewalk. $400,000. Debt tied to my name. All created without my consent. And yet something else about the documents bothered me, something small. I pulled out the Mesa property paperwork again and looked at the closing date. Then the Glendale purchase date. Then the Chandler purchase date. The pattern became clear immediately. Each property was purchased only after the previous one started generating rental income, meaning the business was expanding step by step. Revenue from property 1 helped justify loan 2. Revenue from property 2 helped justify loan 3, which meant something else had to be true. The lenders approving those mortgages had seen financial statements, proof of rental income, profit projections. Someone had been presenting a business plan. And the name on that business plan was probably Mateo. But the credit history supporting it was mine, which meant the banks believed I was part owner in the operation. I sat in my car for almost 15 minutes before starting the engine. The family dinner was only 3 days away. 3 days before my mother planned to gather everyone together. And now I understood why. Because if the business had grown to 3 properties already, the next step was obvious. Expansion. Another investment, another property, another loan. And she would probably announce it proudly in front of the entire family. The successful real estate business, the bright future, the opportunity for everyone. What she didn't know was that I had just discovered the entire structure. 3 properties, $400,000 in debt, all backed by my credit, all hidden from me. But the most disturbing detail wasn't the number of properties. It was the date on the Chandler townhouse purchase, 4 months earlier, which meant my mother and brother had opened another mortgage using my identity after the bank had already started sending warning letters about the Mesa loan, meaning they knew the system was unstable, and they did it anyway. That realization hardened something inside me, because the situation was no longer just irresponsible. It was deliberate. When I got home that evening, Marcus was waiting in my apartment kitchen, reviewing the new documents. He looked up when I walked in. "Let me guess. It's worse. 3 properties," he whistled softly. "Total debt exposure over $400,000. Marcus leaned back in his chair. "That explains the dinner." "Exactly." He pointed at the Chandler mortgage. "This loan closed 4 months ago, which means they're still expanding. They probably think everything is working." I nodded slowly. "Until Saturday." Marcus closed the folder. Then Saturday becomes the moment the system collapses. I sat down across from him. There was still one more question, the most important one. How do you expose something like this in front of your entire family? Marcus thought about it for a moment. Then he said something simple. "You don't attack. You explain. You let the numbers speak, and you ask one question they can't answer." "What question?" He tapped the mortgage statements. "Where did the money go?" I looked down at the stack of documents. 3 properties, hundreds of thousands of dollars, my name on every loan. Saturday night was going to be the first time my entire family heard the truth. But there was still one piece of the puzzle missing, because according to the financial statements Marcus had been reviewing that afternoon, the rental income from those properties added up to far more money than we originally thought, which meant someone had been collecting revenue for nearly 2 years and hiding it. The next step wasn't confronting my mother. It was finding out exactly how much money had passed through that business. Because once we knew that number, the entire story would finally be impossible to deny. On the Thursday night before the family dinner, at 9:14 p.m., Marcus and I sat on the floor of my living room, surrounded by printed bank statements, rental reports, and 3 property files. By the time we finished adding everything together, the number on the whiteboard read $267,000. That was the total rental income generated by the properties over the past 19 months. $267,000. And according to the mortgage statements, almost none of it had been used to pay down the loans connected to my name. If you're listening to this and thinking the number sounds impossible, I thought the same thing at first. But numbers don't exaggerate. They accumulate. And once you line them up in the right order, they tell a story people can't talk their way out of. Marcus stood up and stretched his back. Okay, let's walk through this one more time. He pointed to the first column on the whiteboard. Mesa Vacation Rental. Total bookings, 241. Average nightly rate, $340. Estimated gross revenue, about $178,000. Then he moved to the second column. Glendale Duplex, 2 tenants, each paying $1,400 per month, 9 months of rent, $25,200. Third column. Chandler Townhouse. Rental started 4 months ago, $1,800 per month. Total so far, $7,200. He added the numbers again. $267,000. I stared at the board. That amount alone could have covered nearly every mortgage payment. Instead, the loans were falling behind, which meant something very simple. The money wasn't disappearing. It was being redirected. Marcus circled the number. Wherever this money went, it didn't go toward the debt tied to your credit, which means the person controlling the accounts kept it. My mother, most likely. But we still needed proof. Marcus opened the laptop again. There's one more thing we haven't confirmed. What? The business account. Right now we only have an estimate. If we can show exactly where the rental income deposits went, the whole picture becomes airtight. I leaned forward. How do we see that? He rotated the screen toward me. Vacation rental platforms send payment records, and those payments go to a registered payout account, which means if we can identify that account, we know where the money landed. Marcus typed for a minute, then stopped. There it is. What? The payout registration. He pointed at the screen. Host company, SC, Desert Stays LLC. Primary payout account listed under the business registration. Bank, Southwest Desert Commercial. Account holder, Sophia Castillo. I felt a strange calm settle over me. Every dollar from the rental properties had been transferred directly to my mother's business account, which meant she had controlled the revenue from the beginning. Marcus leaned back. So now the story looks like this. He began listing the steps out loud. Step 1. Your credit secures the mortgage loans. Step 2. The properties generate rental income. Step 3. The income flows into a business account owned by your mother. Step 4. The mortgage payments fall behind. Step 5. You become legally responsible for the debt. He paused. That's not just financial mismanagement. That's extraction. Extraction. The word fit perfectly. For years, I had been treated like the reliable daughter, the responsible one, the stable one. Now I realized what that stability meant to them. I was collateral. Marcus looked at the folder again. You realize something else. What? Your mom might actually believe she did nothing wrong. I frowned. How? Because in her mind, the business benefits the family. Eventually. Maybe. She might think once the properties appreciate, everyone wins. But the risk sits entirely on your credit. I nodded slowly, meaning if anything collapses, I carry the debt. Exactly. The silence between us lasted a few seconds. Then Marcus asked something important. Do you know what your mom plans to say Saturday? Not exactly, but I have a guess. Let me hear it. I thought about the message she sent. Family dinner. Everyone will be there. Talk about the future. She's going to announce the real estate business. Marcus nodded. Show the family how successful Mateo is. Exactly. Then probably ask for support for another property, or refinancing, or investors. And she'll present it like a family opportunity. I stood up and walked to the whiteboard. Then I erased everything except one number. 267,000. Marcus watched quietly. That's the number they won't expect. Why? Because it turns the story upside down. Everyone thinks Mateo is struggling with loans, but if the rental income is that high, the question becomes obvious. Where did the money go? Marcus smiled slightly. Exactly. You're not accusing anyone. You're asking a question. And once that question is out in the open, the room will start doing the math. I looked down at the folder again. Every document in order. Mortgage records, rental income statements, company registration, loan applications. Marcus stood and grabbed his jacket. One more thing. What? How many people are coming Saturday? Probably 20. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends. He nodded slowly. Good. Why good? Because your mom planned an audience, but audiences work both ways. I understood immediately. If the truth came out in front of everyone, it couldn't be quietly rewritten later. Marcus walked toward the door. Get some sleep tonight. Tomorrow, you don't argue. You present facts, and then you let them explain. After he left, I sat alone in the apartment again, the whiteboard still showing the number, 267,000. I thought about the refrigerator in my parents' house growing up. 16 photos of Mateo. One photo of me, hidden behind a magnet. My mother always believed she knew which child would succeed. The risk-taker, the ambitious one, the son with big dreams, and the daughter who would always figure things out. For years, she had been right about one thing. I did figure things out, just not in the way she expected. Because Saturday night wasn't going to be a quiet conversation. It was going to be the moment the entire structure she built around my name finally came into the light. But there was still one thing I hadn't prepared for. Not the documents, not the questions. Something else. Because the next day, while organizing the final papers for that folder, I discovered a single document that explained why my mother had been so confident this system would never collapse. And the moment I read it, I realized something terrifying. Legally, my mother believed she had already protected herself. On Saturday evening at 6:03 p.m., I pulled into the driveway of my parents' house in Tucson and counted 16 cars parked along Sand Ridge Drive. That was twice the number of guests my mother usually invited for family dinners. The banner hanging above the garage door read, "Congratulations, Mateo." And that was the moment I knew exactly what the evening was supposed to be. A celebration, not a confrontation. If you're listening to this and wondering why my mother chose that night to gather the entire family, the answer became obvious the moment I stepped out of the car. She wasn't planning a conversation. She was planning a performance. Marcus parked behind me. He looked at the house, then at the line of cars. This is bigger than dinner. Exactly. The front yard was full of people. My Aunt Maribel, 2 uncles, 3 cousins, neighbors from church. I counted at least 24 guests before we even reached the door. Inside, the house was louder than I had heard it in years. Music, laughter, someone uncorking a bottle of champagne. The living room had been rearranged. Extra tables, food trays, a big cake sitting in the center of the dining table. And written across the frosting in gold letters were 4 words: Castillo Property Group. Marcus leaned toward me. That sounds like a company name. It is, because now I understood what my mother planned to announce. The real estate business. The same business, built with loans attached to my credit. My mother Sophia appeared from the kitchen almost immediately. Her smile was wide and polished. "Una," she said loudly, "my daughter is here." Several relatives turned toward us. My aunt hugged me, my cousin waved. People started asking the usual questions. How is Phoenix? How is work? But my mother barely let those conversations start. She took my arm and guided me toward the dining room. "Perfect timing," she said softly. "For what?" She smiled. "You'll see." Mateo stood near the kitchen island talking to 2 of my uncles. He looked confident, relaxed, wearing a blazer I had never seen before. When he noticed me, he lifted a beer bottle slightly. "Little sister, you made it." I nodded. Of course. His expression didn't show any hint that something was wrong, which meant he didn't know what I had discovered. Yet. Marcus stayed close beside me. My father, Luis, stood near the back wall. Same quiet posture he had always had, hands folded, watching everything. He gave me a small nod. Then my mother clinked a spoon against a glass. The room slowly went quiet. 24 people turned toward her. She stepped forward with the kind of confidence that only comes from someone who believes they control the story. "Thank you all for coming tonight." Her voice filled the room easily. "As you know, our family has always believed in working hard and supporting each other." Several people nodded. My brother Matteo stood beside her now, proud smile, arm around her shoulders. "For the past 2 years," she continued, "Matteo has been building something incredible. He took risks, he worked tirelessly, and tonight, we want to share the results." She gestured toward the banner on the wall. Castillo Property Group. Some relatives started clapping already. My uncle whistled. My mother raised her hand again. In just 18 months, Matteo has acquired 3 investment properties. More clapping. More impressed murmurs. My cousin leaned toward me. 3 properties? That's amazing. I didn't respond. My mother continued. Vacation rentals, long-term tenants, and a business that's already bringing in significant income. Matteo nodded modestly. My chest felt strangely calm, because every number she mentioned matched the documents in my folder. But the story she was telling left out one critical detail. My mother raised her glass. "And this is just the beginning. We're currently preparing to acquire a 4th property, a larger one." Applause again. Then she said the sentence Marcus and I had predicted. "Of course, success like this takes support from family." There it was, the phrase she had used for years. Family helps family. She turned toward me. "Elena has always been the responsible one." Several people smiled. "She's been very supportive of Matteo's journey," which meant the room now believed I had helped build this business. My mother continued smoothly. "And with the next investment opportunity coming, we're hoping the family can continue standing together." A few relatives nodded enthusiastically. My uncle said something about pooling resources. The entire narrative had been carefully prepared. Matteo, the ambitious entrepreneur, Sophia, the proud mother, the family united behind a growing business. The only problem with that story was the stack of documents sitting inside my bag. My mother turned toward me again. "Honey," she said warmly, "why don't you say a few words?" 24 faces turned toward me, expectant, supportive, proud. Marcus squeezed my hand gently under the table. I stood slowly. My mother smiled, clearly confident about what she expected next. Probably a short speech, a congratulations, maybe even an offer to help. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. The room stayed quiet. I opened it slowly. Marcus had been right about one thing. Numbers do not need to shout. They only need to be read. "Before I say anything," I began calmly, "I want to congratulate Matteo." Several people smiled. 3 properties in 18 months is impressive. Matteo grinned slightly. "But I do have one question." I lifted the first page from the folder, a mortgage statement. For the property in Mesa, loan amount, $180,000. Monthly payment, $2,400. My mother's smile tightened slightly. "What is this, Elena?" "Just numbers." I turned the page. Second mortgage, Glendale duplex, loan amount, $95,000. Then the third, Chandler townhouse, $75,000. I placed all 3 papers on the dining table. Total mortgage debt, $400,000. The room grew quieter. My mother's expression was still controlled. "Where are you going with this?" I looked around the room. 24 relatives watching carefully now. "Because according to these loan documents," I said calmly, "I'm responsible for every one of those mortgages." The silence in the room deepened. Matteo frowned. "What?" I slid the loan application across the table. "Your guarantor, Elena Castillo. My name, my credit score, my social security number." The room shifted, people leaning forward now. My mother stepped toward me quickly. "Elena, this is not the time." "You chose the time, Mom." The words landed colder than I expected. You invited everyone here to celebrate the business, so I figured everyone should understand how it works. Mateo's smile had disappeared. Wait, what are you talking about? I lifted another sheet of paper, the rental income report. In the past 19 months, those 3 properties have generated $267,000 in rental revenue. Several relatives gasped softly. My uncle whispered something to my aunt. I placed the document on the table. So my question is simple. If the business earned that much money, why are the mortgage payments behind? The room went completely silent. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it again. Mateo looked from the papers to my face, confused, angry. The first crack in the story had just appeared, but I wasn't finished yet. Because the next document I pulled from the folder wasn't about the mortgages. It was about the business account. The account where every dollar of rental income had been deposited. And the name on that account wasn't Mateo Castillo. It was Sofia Castillo. For about 6 seconds after I placed the bank statement on the table, no one in the room spoke. 24 people stood or sat around the dining room, staring at the document in front of my mother. The header on the page read clearly, Southwest Desert Commercial Banking. Account holder, Sofia Castillo. Business account name, SC Desert Stays, LLC. Balance, $138,412. That number was the first thing people noticed, because it contradicted the story my mother had just told. A struggling investment business does not usually sit on 6 figures in cash. If you have ever watched a room full of relatives slowly realize they have been listening to the wrong version of a story, you know what that silence felt like. My mother was the first one to move. She picked up the paper. Her hands were steady, but her voice was colder now. Elena, she said quietly, where did you get this? Public records, rental income reports, and the bank confirmed the rest. Mateo stepped forward. What bank? I looked at him. The same bank sending late notices for the mortgage under my name? His face changed. Confusion first, then something sharper. You're responsible for those payments too? He said. Exactly. Several relatives started whispering now. My Aunt Maribel leaned toward my uncle. Wait, Elena's name is on the loans. I answered before my mother could interrupt. Yes, all 3 mortgages, $400,000 total. The whispers grew louder. My cousin actually picked up one of the mortgage documents and read it. Borrower Mateo Castillo, guarantor Elena Castillo. My mother stepped closer to me. You had no right to dig through our business records. I met her eyes calmly. Mom, you had no right to use my identity. That sentence changed the room instantly. My uncle stopped whispering. My aunt set her glass down. Even the music playing quietly in the background suddenly felt too loud. Mateo looked between us. Hold on. What identity? I slid the notarized authorization form across the table. The document we found 2 days earlier, signed by Sofia Castillo, granting Mateo permission to use my identity for financial transactions. Mateo read it, then looked up slowly. Mom. My mother didn't answer, so I did. This document was notarized 19 months ago, 1 month before the first mortgage, which means the entire business plan started with permission to use my credit. My aunt gasped softly. You used Elena's credit for all those loans. My mother lifted her chin slightly. Family supports each other. There it was again, the phrase she had used my entire life. But this time, the room reacted differently. My Uncle Dennis frowned. $400,000 is not a small favor. My cousin Natalie picked up the rental income sheet. $267,000 in revenue. Where did that money go? My mother opened her mouth. Operating costs, maintenance, cleaning. Marcus spoke for the first time. Even after those expenses, the property should still be profitable. All eyes turned to him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. If the mortgages were being paid normally, the debt balance should be dropping. Instead, the payments are behind. which means the income went somewhere else. The silence in the room thickened. My mother finally shifted to the next stage: denial. These are complicated investments. You wouldn't understand the long-term strategy. My uncle shook his head slowly. Strategy doesn't usually involve forged signatures. The word forged landed hard. My mother's eyes flashed. No one forged anything. Elena knew we were helping Matteo. I shook my head. I knew about none of it. Matteo looked at me again. You're serious? Completely. His face drained of color. You mean the loans were approved because of my credit score? The realization hit him in real time. You never told me that, he said quietly to my mother. The second stage arrived quickly. Blame. My mother's voice sharpened. This would never have been necessary if you had supported your brother the way family should. The room shifted again. My Aunt Maribel frowned. Elena already worked her way through college, my uncle added, and she's the one carrying the loans. My mother turned toward them. You don't understand the pressure of keeping this family together. Stage 3. Victim. Everything I've done has been for this family. Her voice cracked slightly. I built something that could support all of us, and this is how my daughter repays me. I waited until the room settled again. Then I asked the question Marcus and I had prepared. If the business is for the family, I said calmly, why is the money sitting in your account? I tapped the bank statement. $138,000. My mother looked at the paper, then at the room, then back at me. Her silence lasted 4 seconds. That was when the collapse began. Matteo ran a hand through his hair. Mom, why didn't you tell me Elena was the guarantor? She looked at him sharply. Because you would have hesitated. Exactly. My uncle crossed his arms. So Elena carries the risk, and you collect the income. My mother said nothing. My father, Luis, had not spoken the entire evening. But now he stepped forward slowly. His voice was quiet. Sophia, is this true? She turned toward him. Luis, don't start. He repeated the question. Did you use Elena's credit? She looked around the room, 24 people watching, waiting. Finally, she said the sentence that ended the story she had been telling all night. It was the only way to make the loans work. No one spoke, because the truth had finally arrived in the open. $400,000 in loans, 3 properties, $267,000 in income, all built on my credit. My father stared at the floor for a moment. Then he looked up, not at my mother, at me. For the first time that evening, and his expression wasn't anger. It was something heavier, regret. But the moment that truly ended the night came from someone no one expected, Matteo. He stepped back from the table slowly. Then he looked directly at my mother. You told me Elena agreed to help. My mother's mouth opened. Matteo shook his head. You said she wanted to invest. His voice was shaking now. You told me she believed in the business. The room was silent again, because now the truth had turned in a direction my mother hadn't predicted. Matteo looked at the documents again, then at me. You never agreed to any of this. No. He stared at the floor for almost 10 seconds. Then he said something that no one in the room expected to hear. Mom, what did you do? My mother didn't answer. She couldn't. Because for the first time in her life, the story had slipped completely out of her control. And the room was no longer waiting for me to speak. They were waiting for her. On Tuesday evening, 11 days after that dinner, my phone rang at exactly 8:02 p.m. The caller ID said Luis Castillo, my father. For most of my life, he had rarely called me directly. Conversations usually went through my mother. But things had changed after that night. I answered on the second ring. Hi, Dad. There was a pause on the line. Then he cleared his throat. Hey, mija. His voice sounded tired, not angry, just older somehow. We talked about small things for a minute. The weather in Tucson, my job in Phoenix, the way people talk when they are carefully stepping around something heavier. Then he said it. "I've been looking at the paperwork." I waited. I asked Matteo to show me everything. Another pause. "It's worse than I thought." I didn't say anything, because there wasn't really anything left to say. My father exhaled slowly. "Your mother moved money between the accounts, used the rental income to start new purchases, not to pay the loans. I knew that already. But hearing him say it out loud felt different, more final. Then he said something I never expected to hear from him. I should have asked questions sooner. For 30 years, my father had chosen peace over confrontation. But peace has a cost. Sometimes the quiet people in a family carry their own kind of regret. We sat without a word for a moment. Then he spoke again. "Matteo is selling the Glendale duplex." I blinked. "Already?" He nodded through the phone. "The realtor thinks it'll sell for about $120,000. After the mortgage payoff, that should clear part of the debt." I leaned back on the balcony chair. Phoenix stretched out in front of me, city lights flickering across the desert. And for the first time in weeks, my chest felt lighter. "What about the other properties?" "Mesa is still profitable," he said. "The vacation rental is making money. Matteo wants to transfer the management account into his own name, without your credit attached." That part mattered most. Because 2 days after the dinner, I had already filed formal disputes with the lenders. The bank had frozen the loans while investigators reviewed the documents. And once the notarized authorization form surfaced, everything changed. Legally, the situation wasn't as simple as fraud, but it wasn't clean either. The banks didn't want a public legal fight, so negotiations started quickly. Refinancing, property transfers, debt restructuring. The important part was this: my credit would no longer be tied to any future loans. My father spoke again. "Your mom is staying with your aunt for a while." That part didn't surprise me. My mother had always been strongest when she controlled the narrative. But after that dinner, the narrative belonged to the documents. And documents don't argue. They just exist. We talked for a few more minutes. Then, before hanging up, my father said something quietly. "You did the right thing." Those words meant more than I expected, because growing up, my father rarely took sides. Now, he had. After the call ended, I stayed on my balcony, 14 floors above downtown Phoenix. The air was warm, the kind of dry desert night where the city hums quietly below you. Marcus stepped outside with 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to me. "How did it go?" "Progress." He nodded. "That's good." We sat there without a word for a while. Some evenings don't need conversation. 2 weeks later, a message arrived from Matteo. Just one sentence. "I'm in therapy." I read it twice before replying. Good. Nothing more. Our relationship might rebuild one day, or it might not. Some damage takes time to understand, and some responsibility belongs to more than one person. My mother texted 3 times during that month. Each message sounded similar. I was trying to protect the family. "You don't understand the pressure I was under. You embarrassed me in front of everyone." None of the messages contained the one sentence I needed to hear. I was wrong. So for now, the boundary stays where it is. Because one of the biggest lessons I learned from this entire story is simple. Boundaries don't require agreement. They only require clarity. The rental house in Mesa is still operating, but the loan will soon be refinanced entirely under Matteo's name, without my credit attached. The Glendale duplex is already under contract, and the Chandler townhouse will likely be sold next. Slowly, the structure built on my identity is being dismantled, piece by piece. But the most important change isn't financial. It's quieter than that. Every Tuesday evening now, my father calls. Sometimes the conversations last 5 minutes, sometimes 20. Last week, he told me about fixing an engine at work. Then he said something that made me smile. "I told one of the guys at the shop about your accounting job. He said you must be pretty sharp." I told him my daughter built her life herself. No shortcuts. I looked out over the Phoenix skyline and said nothing for a moment. Because sometimes recognition arrives late, but when it finally shows up, it still counts. People sometimes ask me if the penthouse balcony is my favorite part of living here. The view, the lights, the quiet. But that's not really it. My favorite part is something simpler. When I lock the front door at night, I know one thing for certain. Everything inside that apartment belongs to the life I built myself. No hidden loans, no silent obligations, no one using my name without permission. Just my work, my choices, my future. 8 years ago, my mother told me something I never forgot. Elena will always figure things out. At the time, she meant it as reassurance. Now I understand what it really meant. I would always be the one cleaning up the mess. The difference now is simple. I'm still figuring things out, but only for myself. If this story resonated with you, I'd really love to hear where you're listening from and what time it is in your city right now. Stories like this reach people in ways numbers alone never can. And if you've ever had to draw a boundary with someone you love, even when it made the room uncomfortable, you're not alone. Sometimes the strongest thing you can say is simply this: no more. Thank you for staying with me until the end. And if you want another story about family, betrayal, and the moment the truth finally steps into the light, there's one waiting for you next. For 30 years, my father had chosen silence. But that night, something changed. Because when the truth finally came out, silence was no longer possible.